Hi, my name's Faith, and I guess you could say I've always been the one no one listens to. They say I overreact, stir the pot, cause trouble. But when I drove into a blizzard, alone, and found my sister half frozen in a cave, holding her two kids like shields against death, when I realized her husband had left her there, on purpose, and told her, "You're pathetic. No one's coming for you." Well, I started wondering, what kind of family stays quiet after that? What kind of man plans something like that and walks away? And what does it take for the one everyone ignores to finally be heard? Would you have come back for her? Or would you have left her too? There was a time when my voice filled a room and still somehow managed to bounce off every wall unheard. Today was no different. I stood in the break room of the clinic, still in my scrubs, holding my phone in one hand and a lukewarm cup of vending machine coffee in the other. On the small TV in the corner, a meteorologist was rambling through a warning graphic lit up in violent reds and purples. Montana's mountain corridor was about to get buried in a historic whiteout. I stared at my phone. The family group chat sat there like a grave. My message blinked green. Delivered, not replied. "Big storm incoming tonight. Livingston area. You guys should probably stay off the mountain roads. Malis, did you make it back from the grocery run yet?" Read by Seraphine. Nothing else. Not a thumbs up. Not a thanks. Not even a passive-aggressive ellipsis. I let out a long breath, more out of habit than stress. At this point, being ignored felt routine. It used to hurt. Lately, it just meant I could think clearer. Growing up, they always called me the sensitive one. Apparently, if you notice when people are in danger or when someone's tone shifts into cruelty, you're just overreacting. They never listened when I spoke up. And when I did speak, it was always too much or too soon or too loud. But this time, this wasn't about me. I checked the radar again. The worst of the blizzard was set to hit the outskirts by sundown, just north of the trail access road near Bear Ridge, right where Malis and her family like to take weekend drives. I tapped the Find My icon. Her phone had last pinged near a ranger post up there, hours ago. No movement since. I called her. Straight to voicemail. No, not this time. I threw away the coffee, walked out of the clinic, and slid into my Subaru. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as I pulled out of the lot. There was no second guessing. I drove home fast but careful, packed my emergency bag in under 5 minutes. Thermal blanket, 2 fleece layers, a flashlight, protein bars, a mini first aid kit. My boots were still in the closet, exactly where I left them last winter. On the way back to the car, I left a voicemail at the front desk. "Hey, it's Faith. I might not make it in tomorrow. Just a heads up. I need to check on my sister. Something doesn't feel right." I didn't say what I really thought, that I might be the only one who will. The drive started calmly. Snowflakes came down soft at first, floating like confetti across the windshield. But 20 miles in, the storm thickened. The clouds swallowed the horizon, and with each bend in the mountain road, the snow got heavier, more aggressive, like it was trying to erase everything it touched. Black ice made the car jerk twice. My palms gripped the steering wheel tighter. The second time I skidded, I felt the familiar rush of panic start to curl into my chest. Don't freeze. Breathe through it. You've done harder things. I turned the heat up and leaned forward, eyes squinting through the swipes of the windshield wipers. Back when we were kids, Malis once left me at school after a fight. Mom thought she was picking me up, but she'd taken the car to go see her boyfriend. And I stood in that parking lot until a janitor finally called home. I never brought it up again. Some things just settle into your bones. But tonight wasn't about the past. I wasn't out here for retribution. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just couldn't sit still and pretend I didn't feel the shift in the air. When you've lived your whole life being told you're too much, you learn to trust that gut that everyone tells you to ignore. I turned onto the narrow forest road leading toward the base trail. The snow was thick here, unplowed, untouched. Every crunch beneath my tires sounded like a countdown. And then I saw it. A vehicle, stationary, half buried on the right shoulder. Familiar shape. Blue Toyota Highlander. Malis. I hit the brakes gently, skidding to a halt a few feet away. Grabbing my flashlight, I stepped out. The cold hit me like a wall, slicing through my coat, my gloves, straight to the marrow. The windshield was frosted over. No light inside. I banged twice on the driver's window. Melis? Nothing. I walked around to the passenger side. The door wasn't locked. When I opened it, a rush of cold air blew out like the breath of something that had given up. Inside, it was chaos. Kids' toys strewn across the floor. An open granola bar wrapper on the dash. Melis's scarf balled up in the back seat. No people. I reached into the front seat to grab her phone. Dead. Then I saw it. On the passenger seat, a small notepad. One of those cheap spiral ones she kept in her purse. Written in smudged red lipstick, across the top page. I failed again. I froze. The storm roared louder now, like it knew something I didn't. I stood there, snow collecting on my shoulders, my breath coming in short, harsh puffs. She didn't write that for me, but God help me, I felt every word. I didn't even shut the car door behind me. The wind slammed it for me, hard enough that snow shook loose from the roof. I stood there, boots sunk deep into the slush along the shoulder, staring through the fogged-up windows of Melis's SUV. Everything about it felt wrong. The car was cold, still, lifeless. I reached for the door handle and gave it a pull. Unlocked. The interior greeted me with a kind of silence that didn't feel like safety. It felt abandoned. I climbed in slowly, flashlight between my teeth. The smell hit me first, faint traces of fruit snacks, old coffee, and something else, panic. I don't know how to describe that scent except to say, it's what clings to fabric after a person has sat still for too long while the world spins into chaos. A child's mitten was wedged between the seats, tiny, purple. There was no sign of her, no sign of them. I called out, once, twice. No response. The snow outside had already started covering my tracks. As I circled the car, a shadow moved in the snow. No, not a shadow. Footprints. Faint. Small. Scattered, like someone had been carrying something heavy and stumbled. A pattern you only notice if you've spent a decade reading patients' gait through hospital hallways. I scanned the pattern with my light, heart climbing into my throat. 3 sets. One pair of little prints walking straight, the other dragging, and then the heavier ones, adult-sized, unsteady, staggered. I didn't even stop to think. I started walking. The wind was cutting at my face like needles. My thighs ached with every step, pushing through snow that reached my knees. I pulled my scarf tighter and kept going. My flashlight beam shook in my hand, not from fear, but cold. My mind tried to wander, tried to escape. It landed on a memory I didn't ask for. Melis and I. Teenagers. We had fought. Over what? I don't remember. But she had taken Dad's keys and left me at the community center after dark. I had stood there in a too-thin hoodie, watching each pair of headlights that passed by, hoping one of them would turn in and pick me up. They didn't. Eventually, I walked home. I remember thinking, it's not that she forgot. She just didn't care enough to come back. But here I was, crashing through 2 feet of snow, trying to get to her. Because the truth was, I still did. My foot slipped on a buried rock, and I went down hard. My knee screamed. I bit my tongue and pulled myself up, pressing a hand to the gash on my palm. It stung, warm blood against freezing air. But I didn't stop. I don't know how long I walked, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 30. Time doesn't stretch normally when your lungs are burning and your heart is pounding out of rhythm. Then I heard it, a sound so faint I thought I imagined it at first. A whimper, not a scream, just a broken little sob, caught in the wind. I turned toward it and saw a dip in the snow, a dark slit cut into the side of the slope, a cave, barely visible, natural, temporary, maybe 5 feet high if that. I bent low and stepped inside. The first thing I saw was Elric, his face gray-blue and eyes barely open. His little arms were wrapped around Lyora, who wasn't crying but looked far too still for a 5-year-old. Her lips were pale, her hands limp in her brother's grip. And then I saw Melis. She was curled up like she was trying to fold herself out of existence. Her coat was open, scarf gone. Her eyes opened when I said her name, but she didn't speak right away. "It's me," I whispered. "It's Faith." She blinked, slow, like her brain was buffering. Her lips cracked as they moved. He said, "No one would come." I swallowed the bile that rose in my throat. He was wrong. I pulled the thermal blanket from my backpack, wrapped the kids first, then her. They were ice. All of them. I tucked Leora into my coat, pressed her small hands between my own. Malis shivered, but didn't move. Her breath was shallow, weak. "He said I'm pathetic," she said in that same empty voice. "He said no one would care." I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a breath. "Then it's a good thing I've never listened to a damn thing he said." She didn't laugh. She didn't nod, but she didn't close her eyes again either. I secured the kids to me with the straps from my bag, Leora against my chest, Elric against my back. I took off my second coat and wrapped it around Malis. Then I looked at her. "You're getting out of here. I don't care if I have to drag you." The storm outside howled like a warning, but I didn't pause. I lifted Malis by the arms and helped her stand. She swayed, but held. As we stepped out into the white blur, I whispered so only the storm could hear, maybe for him, wherever he was. "You don't get to die today." The wind fought us with everything it had. Each step forward felt like lifting a cinder block with one foot while dragging the other through molasses. My back burned from the weight of Elric pressed against it. Leora's small frame was bundled against my chest, her forehead leaning against my collarbone. Malis barely moved beside me, one arm looped around my shoulders, her body swaying like a sleepwalker. I didn't speak. Talking would have wasted breath. Instead, I focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The trail back to the road was mostly covered now, our own prints erased by fresh snowfall. I counted 20 steps, paused, then 20 more. We reached a bend in the ridge where the slope evened out slightly. That's when Malis collapsed. She just dropped, dead weight, down to her knees. I let go of Leora for just a second, carefully adjusting her, and turned to Malis. "We're almost there," I said through clenched teeth. 10 more minutes. She didn't look at me. Her voice was so quiet I barely caught it. "The kids need to make it. You don't have to waste your life on me." The calm that washed over me wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of stillness you feel right before something inside snaps. "Do you hear yourself?" I said. "You really believe you don't matter, don't you?" "I ruin everything," she whispered. He was right. Even Mom says it. Always said it. I squatted down in front of her. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I looked her straight in the eye, even though hers wouldn't meet mine. "Why do you think you're the only one who doesn't deserve help?" She didn't answer. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a protein bar, ripped it open with my teeth, and handed it to Elric. His fingers were stiff, but he took it. I gave Leora a few sips from my canteen before tucking her back inside my coat. We waited. I stared at Malis the entire time. And as she sat there, hunched, shaking, something in her face shifted, not like a sudden realization, but a slow erosion. She didn't say anything, but her eyes glistened, not from the cold, from whatever was breaking inside her, and for a moment, I wasn't on a snowy ridge anymore. I was 12 again, standing barefoot on the cold kitchen tile, holding a glass of milk in both hands. I had crept down the stairs after hearing Malis get screamed at by Mom. Some fight about grades or chores, or her being too much to handle. I couldn't make sense of the words, only the silence that followed. Malis had locked herself in her room. I remember standing outside her door, not brave enough to knock. So I slid the glass of milk through the narrow opening near the carpet. I waited, holding my breath. I never heard a thank you, but I stayed there anyway for maybe 10 minutes until I heard her cry. Not sobs, just the quiet kind. The kind you do into a pillow when you're trying to make sure no one hears. Now, standing on that ridge with frozen skin and burning legs, I bent down to her level again, face to face. "Back then," I said, "I brought you milk. Tonight, I brought you your kids. Don't ask me to walk away again." She looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I saw something other than defeat in her expression. She nodded once. It was small, almost nothing, but it was enough. We got up together, slowly, 1 inch at a time. The snow had let up just slightly, enough for me to see the faint outline of the road in the distance. I tightened the strap around Elric's chest, felt Leora stir a little, and pulled Melis's arm across my shoulder again. The silence wasn't as thick now. The wind still howled, but I wasn't listening to it anymore. I was focused on breathing, moving, surviving. Half an hour passed, maybe more. We reached the road again just as dusk began to settle, blue and gray skies bleeding into the snow-covered trees. Melis stumbled twice. Each time I caught her. Each time she apologized. "Don't," I said firmly. "Just walk." When we got back to the SUV, it looked like a ghost sitting under a sheet. Snow had crusted over the windshield. The doors were difficult to open, but I managed. Inside, it was freezing, but at least it wasn't moving air. I helped Melis into the front seat, buckled her in, then gently unwrapped Leora from my coat and sat her on my lap in the back while Elric huddled beside me. I started the car. It sputtered, then caught. Thank God. I cranked the heat. It would take time, but the kids would warm up. Melis leaned her head back against the seat, eyes closed, but still conscious. I looked down at Leora, brushed a bit of frost from her hair, and kissed her forehead. "We're okay now," I said softly, even though I wasn't sure it was true. We stayed there for nearly 20 minutes, letting our bodies thaw. The heater ticked louder than usual. Elric finally spoke. "I thought you weren't coming," he said, not accusing, just honest. I gave him a half smile. "Yeah, that makes two of us." Then I leaned forward and whispered to myself, more than to anyone else. They said no one would come, but I did. And I'm not leaving without her. The heater hummed low as the car's interior slowly warmed, though the windows stayed fogged and the cold still sat under my skin. I hadn't said a word since I slid the SUV into park off the shoulder of the mountain road. Melis was asleep, or at least pretending. Her breath was shallow, her lips pale. Leora was curled up against my side, her tiny fingers clinging to a corner of my coat. Elric stared at nothing, his eyes hollow, jaw locked like he was keeping a secret from even himself. I didn't rush them. We needed a few more minutes. I needed a few more minutes. I let the silence settle before leaning across the center console and flipping open the glove box. A flashlight rolled out and tapped my leg. Beneath it sat a folded map, standard gas station foldout of the area trails, and something black and rectangular tucked into the upper shelf, a GPS unit. Not the kind that syncs with your phone, one of those standalone, old-school ones hunters use when they want to go off-grid. I powered it on. No recent routes. The history had been cleared. I opened the map, smoothing it out across my lap, the creases still stiff. Red ink circled the access trail near Bear Ridge, the exact location where I had found Melis's car. There were no other marks, just that one ring, drawn with a surgeon's precision. My stomach dropped. You don't mark something like that unless you plan to return, or never return at all. There were 2 extra bottles of water and a clean set of gloves in the back seat. Not used, not touched. The pieces clicked into place one at a time, slow but undeniable. He hadn't forgotten them. This wasn't panic. This was logistics. I stared at the red circle again. It blinked in my mind like a target. "He planned this," I said under my breath. "He planned all of it." I didn't realize Elric was watching me until I folded the map back up. His voice was quiet, small but razor sharp. "He said we don't need Mom anymore." My entire body went still. I looked at him, gently. "When did he say that?" "In the car. Before we stopped." I swallowed hard, the taste of metal rising in the back of my throat. "He said we'd be better off. That she's always crying. That she's weak. That snow makes things quiet." My jaw clenched, and I had to fight the urge to break something. Instead, I reached into my bag and grabbed a plastic folder. I slid the map and the GPS unit into it, snapped it shut, and stuffed it into my backpack. I didn't let the kids see the anger creeping up behind my eyes. They'd seen enough. I turned to Malis, gently shook her shoulder. Hey, I said, we're heading back to town. Just sleep. I've got us. She stirred, barely opened her eyes. Is this real? It's real. A few minutes later, I started the car. We pulled off the ridge, slow and steady, tires crunching through packed snow. I kept the heater on high, and Lyora's head finally sagged against my arm, her breath slow and even. I didn't speak again until we hit pavement. Once the last bump of gravel was behind us, I pulled into a turnout, put the car in park, and reached for my phone. I texted Isolde. Need to talk. Urgent. She responded within seconds. You okay? Not really. Got something I need to show you. Can you meet me? Of course. You at Malis's. Driving back now. 30 minutes out. Don't tell anyone. I slipped the phone back into my coat pocket and adjusted the mirror to check on Elric. He hadn't fallen asleep, but he looked calmer. Still, a little too still. Hey, I said. You did the right thing, telling me. That wasn't easy. He didn't nod, just blinked. He said it like he believed it, he whispered, like it made sense. I didn't say anything else. I couldn't, not yet. The rest of the drive passed in silence. By the time we reached the edge of town, the snow had thinned to a whisper and the lights from the main road cut through the windshield like a promise. I turned onto the street where Malis lived, passed 2 more blocks, and eased into the driveway. Isolde's car was already there. I helped Malis into the house first. She was too tired to resist, leaning into my side with every step. Isolde came out to meet us, no coat, just house shoes and a fleece pullover, and took one look at my face before her expression dropped. She helped me get the kids settled inside, hot cocoa for Elric, warm towels for Lyora. Malis collapsed onto the couch, arms wrapped around herself like armor. 10 minutes later, we were in the kitchen. I laid out the folder, opened it like a surgeon prepping for an operation. Map, circled trailhead, GPS wiped, 2 untouched water bottles. Extra gloves, I said. Elric told me what he heard in the car. Isolde didn't flinch. She flipped the map open, turned the GPS over in her hands. He cleared this? Every route, blank slate, she exhaled. He didn't panic, he executed. I nodded. And he made sure to do it where the signal cuts out. No cameras, no towers, nothing. Her jaw set. This is premeditated, you realize that? I do. She looked me in the eye. And you realize what's coming once you say it out loud? Yes. A long silence passed. Then she said the one thing I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just abandonment. This was an attempt to make her disappear. I looked over her shoulder, where Malis had fallen asleep on the couch with Lyora curled into her side. He didn't just want her gone, I whispered. He wanted us to watch her fade and act like it was inevitable. Isolde reached over and squeezed my hand once. Then she picked up the folder and shut it firmly. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. If silence was all they offered, then silence is what I'd use against them. By the time the kids were down for a nap and Malis had drifted into shallow sleep again on the couch, the snow outside had turned into a steady whisper instead of a roar. I stood in the kitchen with my laptop open, the soft glow of the screen the only light in the room besides the dim overhead above the sink. I took one more deep breath, then opened a new email. 2. Family group. Subject. We need to talk. I didn't bother explaining myself at length. I knew the pattern. If I sent anything too emotional, I'd be called dramatic. If I didn't include enough detail, I'd be accused of leaving things out. So I kept it simple. Attached. A photo of the map Dorian had marked. A screenshot of the GPS tracker interface. My notes on what Elric said in the car. A brief sentence below each one. This wasn't an accident. I didn't say it was attempted murder. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't yell. I just gave them facts. Let them draw the picture. After I hit send, I closed the laptop and stared at the backsplash. It was one of those outdated beige tiles from the early 2000s, cracked along the grout lines. I had a moment where I wanted to pick up a spoon and just dig one tile out, but I didn't move. An hour passed, then another. I made a pot of coffee and sipped it standing up. I checked Melis's breathing every 20 minutes. Elric was reading on the floor, Leora curled against him. My phone didn't vibrate. It didn't light up. Until it did. Unknown number. I answered, expecting a telemarketer. Instead, it was Jacob, my oldest brother. What are you doing, Faith? No hello, no how are the kids, just straight into it. I sent you the email, I said. I thought you should see it. You always do this, he snapped. You take something simple and blow it out of proportion. This isn't your mess to fix. Jacob, she almost died. And you think stirring the pot is going to help? He cut me off. Dorian's got a career, a reputation. You really want to drag that through the mud based on some map and your opinion? I felt heat rising under my skin. It's not an opinion. Of course it is, he said, voice rising. You've always needed to be the one to expose everyone, to point fingers. You get off on it. I didn't answer. Just listened to him breathe on the other end of the line. Don't do this, he said finally, quieter now. You'll tear the family apart. Again. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, then placed it down gently on the counter. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my chest started to ache. A few minutes later, a voicemail notification popped up. From Mom. I played it on speaker. Faith, Seraphine said in that clipped, sing-song voice she always used when trying to sound composed. I saw what you sent. I don't know why you're doing this. Dorian has done more for this family than you ever have. He's given Melis a good life, a home, 2 beautiful children. I know things got difficult, but this isn't the way. You're embarrassing yourself, sweetheart. Let it go. She ended the call with a tired sigh, like I had just spilled water on her nice rug, and she didn't have the energy to clean it up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I opened my messages and took a screenshot of the voicemail timestamp. Then I deleted it. It was just after 8 p.m. when I texted Isolde. Can you come over? I need a second set of eyes. She replied instantly. On my way. By the time she arrived, I'd laid everything out on the table. The folder with documents, the photos, the voice memos, the timeline scribbled out in pen on a legal pad. Isolde didn't waste time with small talk. She sat down, flipped through everything, and stayed quiet until the last page. When she looked up, her face had changed. This isn't just bad behavior, she said flatly. This is malicious. This is calculated. I know, I said. She leaned back, crossed her arms. You know how this plays out, right? Tell me anyway. They'll circle the wagons, protect him, pretend you're overreacting, frame you as unstable, difficult, jealous. They'll say you've always been the problem. I smirked, bitter. They already have. She took her phone out and tapped around for a second, then slid it toward me. A contact with a name I didn't recognize. M. Alston. Family law plus quiet litigation. He's sharp. He's quiet. He knows how to build a case without making it look like one. I copied the number into my phone without hesitation. Later that night, after she left and the house had gone quiet again, I sat in the dark living room. I didn't turn on the lamp. Just sat there with my journal, writing. I didn't even write full sentences, just pieces. Red ink on a map. She's weak. 2 extra gloves. Let the cold have you. You always make things worse. It felt like I was pinning notes to the inside of my own skull. I always thought if I screamed loud enough, someone would hear me, I wrote. Turns out, the silence is thicker than the storm. I didn't cry. Not then. Just before I turned in, my phone lit up again. One new message. Seraphine. It was just 5 words. You've been warned. Walk away. I took a screenshot. Saved it. No reply. Because if silence was the only language they understood, then I'd speak it better than any of them ever had. He erased her like a spreadsheet cell. Now it was my turn to highlight the file and drag it into full view. The next morning, I waited until the kids were eating cereal and the house was quiet again before slipping outside with Melis's old dashcam. The cord was still wrapped around it, a faint fingerprint smudged across the edge of the screen. I carried it like it was a piece of her body someone had tried to sever, casual in its shape, but critical in what it held. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table, plugged the device into my laptop, and waited. The screen flickered with static, then gray light. The camera had captured hours of road noise, tire crunches, wiper blades squeaking across ice. I fast-forwarded through most of it until I heard a familiar voice, low but unmistakable. Dorian. The timestamp was from the day of the storm, about 20 minutes before Melis's last GPS ping. His voice came through the speakers like a knife wrapped in fleece. "You're pathetic," he said calmly. "No one's coming for you. Let the cold have you. It'll be quiet." I froze. He didn't sound angry, not panicked, not even frustrated. Just done, like someone taking out the trash. I played it again, slower this time, in case I'd imagined it. I hadn't. I sat there for nearly 5 minutes afterward, not blinking, not breathing, just staring at the screen like it might crack and spill something even worse. Then I copied the file to 3 separate flash drives, labeled each in black marker, A, B, and C. One for my bag, one to mail, one to burn if needed. When Isolde came by that afternoon, I played it for her. She didn't speak while it played. Her mouth twisted slightly at the end, like she'd just bit into something bitter. "You record this in any other state," she said softly, "and he's already in handcuffs." "I know." She looked at me for a long time. "What do you want to do?" "I want to finish this quietly, but thoroughly." She gave me a single nod, then turned back to the kitchen counter, where I had spread out the rest of the folder: GPS map, insurance paperwork, photos. My handwriting filled 2 pages: timeline, motive, means, opportunity. Melis still hadn't asked where I'd been that morning. She was upstairs now, napping while Leora lay beside her coloring with a pink crayon that barely left a mark. Elric sat at the dining table across from me, his cereal untouched, a book open in front of him. I slid a mug of cocoa in front of him. "You don't have to talk," I said, "but if you do remember something, I'm listening." He looked up slowly. "He told us to get out of the car." I kept my face steady. "What else did he say?" "He pushed Mommy, told her she needed to walk it off. Then he got back in and drove away. I thought it was a game at first, like hide and seek or something." I took a breath. "Did he say why?" Elric blinked once. He said, "This will fix everything." I sat back, the words ringing through me like a fire alarm muffled by snow. That night, I packed everything into a new folder, labeled the front with one word: intent. I included the map with the red circle still vivid, the GPS device now carefully wrapped in a plastic bag, the dashcam file copied again, and Elric's handwritten statement, which he wrote himself, his letters small and tight. Then I picked up the phone and called the number Isolde had given me. The man who answered didn't ask my name first. He just said, "This is Marlon." I explained the basics: my sister, the storm, what I'd found. He asked only one question: "Do you want to go public, or do you want to go legal?" "Legal," I said. "Quiet, for now." We arranged to meet the next morning at his office, tucked between a bakery and a barber shop in a part of town no one from my family ever drove through. It felt right. When I hung up, I sat alone in the living room, listening to the tick of the baseboard heater. It was nearly midnight. The air still carried a chill, even with the thermostat turned up. I wrapped the blanket tighter around myself and whispered the words I hadn't said out loud until now. This wasn't about proving myself anymore. This is about justice, quiet, ruthless, undeniable. I went upstairs and checked on the kids again. Leora was finally asleep, arms wrapped around a teddy bear that hadn't left her side in days. Elric was on the top bunk, book under his pillow like a shield. Melis stirred as I stepped into the hallway. She didn't open her eyes, but her voice reached me in the dark. "Are you doing something?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "but not for me." And she didn't ask more. Before dawn, I was up again, coffee in hand, folder in my bag. I kissed the kids goodbye, told Melis I'd be gone a few hours, and stepped outside into a sky that still hadn't decided whether it wanted to stay winter or move on. I didn't care about the weather anymore. I drove slowly, no radio, no distractions, just the sound of my breath and the faint buzz of tires on wet asphalt. When I reached Marlon's office, the blinds were half closed, a small sign in the window reading, "By appointment only." I knocked twice. He answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. He wore jeans, a button-down, and a tired expression, the kind of man who had seen too many broken people try to tape themselves back together in his conference room. He gestured to a chair, and I handed him the folder. He opened it, flipped through the contents, and didn't say anything for a long while. When he finally looked up, his voice was steady. "You know what this is, right?" I nodded. He leaned forward. "You're not wrong, but you're walking into something that's going to get messy. You ready for that?" "I've already been through worse," I said. He smiled, just barely. "Good, then let's begin." He thought it was just dinner. I brought dessert and documentation. It was late afternoon when I parked 2 blocks from the restaurant. The sun had already dipped low behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the snow-covered street. The family had agreed to meet for dinner at Birch Table, a rustic place downtown with overpriced entrees and whitewashed brick walls. The kind of place Seraphine picked to make everything look polished, even when everything underneath was cracked. I sat in the car, watching the front door from my rearview mirror. A family dinner, they said. Just a little get-together, they said. No mention of tension. No mention of lawyers. But they knew. I had sent the text earlier that morning. "We need to talk, in person." That was all. No attachments, no emotion, just a deadline. Inside my bag, zipped tight, was the folder. Flash drives, documents, receipts, statements, printed stills from surveillance footage, all the threads I had pulled together into one clean knot. A knot I planned to untie in front of every last one of them. The lawyer, Marlon, was parked in the alley behind the building. He'd be waiting for my signal. Not to burst in like a movie scene, but to be ready when the walls finally gave in. I stepped out, pulling my coat tight around me, and walked toward the restaurant. My boots crunched over gravel and salt as I approached the door. I paused, just for a moment, hand hovering near the handle. I wasn't nervous. I was deliberate. As soon as I walked in, I saw them. Seraphine had already claimed the corner booth, the one with the best lighting. Jacob was there too, scrolling his phone like he couldn't be bothered. His wife gave me a tight smile, the kind that pretends you're not 5 minutes away from exposing everything they've tried to pretend doesn't exist. And then there was Dorian. Polished shirt, no jacket, casual but calculated. He looked up from his water glass and offered that same half-smile he always gave when he knew something you didn't. "Faith," Seraphine greeted, her tone neutral but clipped. "So glad you could make it." "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." We ordered food, or rather, they did. I didn't touch the menu. I waited. The table buzzed with surface-level conversation. Work, winter tires, someone's promotion. No one asked Malis how she was doing. No one mentioned the storm. No one said a word about what she had been pulled out of. 10 minutes into the meal, I placed the flash drive on the table. It made a soft click against the wood. Not loud, but final. Jacob glanced at it first. "Oh, what's that?" "Play it," I said, sliding my phone across the table, already cued to the recording. Dorian's smile faltered. "Faith," Seraphine began, but I cut her off. "No more guessing, no more twisting words. Just listen." I hit play. The table fell silent. Dorian's voice filled the air, calm and unhurried. "You're pathetic. No one's coming for you. Let the cold have you. It'll be quiet." Seraphine's fork dropped. It clattered against her plate, and then silence again. I looked around at the faces I'd known since I was a child. None of them looked back. "Care to explain that?" I asked. Dorian blinked. "That could have been taken out of context." Jacob leaned back. "This is what you dragged us here for?" I pulled the map from the folder, laid it out flat on the table, the red circle at the Bear Ridge trailhead glowing under the restaurant lights, then the GPS device, then the signed insurance policy. Then the time-stamped photos of Dorian, laughing over coffee at a gas station, 2:47 p.m., 2 hours after Malis's car was found abandoned. "Still think it's just drama?" I asked. Seraphine looked stunned. but not apologetic, just stunned. Dorian, I said, filed a $1.2 million life insurance policy 2 weeks before the storm. He listed himself as the beneficiary. He cleared the GPS history. He pushed Malis out of the car, left the kids with her, then drove away. You have no idea what was going on between them, Seraphine said, her voice brittle. Marriage is complicated. And murder is illegal, I shot back. Jacob scoffed. You always make things worse, always need to be the hero. No, I said. I just stopped pretending none of this mattered. Dorian leaned forward, his voice low and firm. This is slander. You don't have a case. I met his eyes. You're right. I don't. Then I nodded toward the window. The lawyer stepped inside, calm and confident. He walked up to the table and placed a small envelope in front of Dorian. You've been served, Marlon said evenly. Restraining order, formal complaint, and a pending investigation into reckless endangerment, fraud, and insurance abuse. Dorian's hands curled into fists. Get out, Seraphine whispered, to me. You've done enough. No, I said, standing. I've finally done exactly enough. I turned to Malis, who had stayed quiet through it all. Her eyes were rimmed red, but she hadn't cried. You believe me now? I asked. She didn't speak. She just nodded, slow and firm. We left together, walked out past the hostess, past the wide-eyed couple at the next table, past the cold looks thrown our way. In the parking lot, I finally exhaled. You okay? Marlon asked. I will be. We drove home in silence, but it was a different silence now. Not the kind that tried to smother me, the kind that let me breathe, because no matter what came next, I had dragged it into the light. And Dorian would never again get to decide who deserved to survive. Justice might come in court. But peace, that's something we'd have to build. The ride home after the dinner was quiet. Malis sat in the passenger seat, her gaze locked on the blurred headlights outside. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer commentary. She didn't need to. Everything had been said. The silence between us wasn't avoidance, it was agreement. Leora had fallen asleep in the back seat with her head in my coat, thumb tucked in her mouth. Elric sat beside her, hugging his knees. I watched them in the rearview mirror, and it struck me. That was the first time they'd seemed at rest since the storm. The next morning, the house still smelled faintly of the wood fire from 2 nights ago. Malis brewed coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. Her hands were steady now, tired but no longer shaking. I didn't think anyone would believe me, she said. I didn't ask them to. She looked down. He said I was paranoid, that I was always twisting things, always turning people against him. Gaslighting 101, I said. Her mouth lifted just a little. Funny how he called me dramatic, right before leaving us to freeze. I didn't laugh, not because it wasn't bitterly true, but because some wounds don't let you laugh yet. We spent the afternoon sorting through boxes, old mail, insurance notices, half-filled notebooks that Malis had shoved into drawers over the years. She found a folder labeled Emergency Contacts, inside of which was a life insurance policy Dorian had tucked away behind her back. It was dated 2 weeks before the blizzard. Amount, $1.2 million. I recognized the forged signature immediately. It had been traced from an old lease agreement. Why would he think this wouldn't catch up to him? She asked. Because men like Dorian think they're always the exception. The lawyer filed the paperwork that same day. Restraining order was approved immediately. Investigation opened. Insurance claim frozen. The wheels had started turning. But fallout in families doesn't just happen in courtrooms. It happens over phone calls, behind closed doors, around Sunday dinner tables when one chair stays empty. By midweek, I got the first text from my cousin, neutral, nosy. Then a voicemail from Aunt Renee, who hadn't spoken to me since 2016, but suddenly wanted to hear my side. I didn't respond, because the side I was on didn't need defending anymore. 3 days later, Seraphine showed up unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there in her pearl coat, a container of banana bread in her hands like a peace offering she didn't really believe in. Can I come in? She asked, eyes darting past me to the living room. I think we're fine on baked goods. She sighed and looked down. You always did have a sharp tongue. And you always liked the sound of your own voice. She flinched, visibly. I didn't feel good about it, but I didn't regret saying it either. I want to understand what happened. You were there. You heard the tape. That could have been edited. And the forged documents, the footage, the GPS? She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me the container. I was wrong, she said. Not an apology, just a sentence. But he's still their father. No, I said. He was their biological contributor. Being a father is a choice, and he chose to leave them in the snow. She left without another word. The banana bread sat untouched on the counter until Elric offered to feed it to the birds. That weekend, the official papers arrived, Dorian's suspension from work, pending internal review. We didn't dance or celebrate, just breathed a little deeper. Malis started therapy. I drove her to the first appointment. On the way, she held the kid's drawing in her lap. A crayon sketch of the four of us, hand in hand. Stick figures with names scribbled above. Mom, Leora, me, Aunt F. You know, she said softly, he always said no one would come for me. I came. You stayed. Even better. At night, the kids slept easier. Leora still asked if I was going to be there in the morning. I always said yes. We kept the folder locked away now. The documents, the evidence, all filed under the lawyer's care. But I'd memorized every page, every timestamp, every word Dorian had said. One evening, I found myself back in the kitchen with Malis, sharing the last of the coffee and watching the sky turn purple over the ridge. He tried to erase you, I said. Yeah, she said, but you held on. You held on too. The light in the window caught her face, and for the first time in weeks, she looked less like someone surviving and more like someone beginning to live again. We didn't talk about forgiveness. That's too big a word for stories like this. But we talked about starting fresh, about safety, about giving the kids a life where silence didn't mean danger. Because for all the paperwork and hearings and formal charges, peace wasn't going to be handed to us. We were going to have to build it, one day, one room, one boundary at a time. And we would. The following spring came in slowly, like someone easing into a room after a long absence. In Livingston, snow didn't exactly melt. It receded, reluctantly. By April, the roads were clear again. The mountains softened in patches of green, and the wind finally carried something besides bitterness. That morning, I walked to the elementary school, a block and a half from our house. Malis was already there, guiding a small group of second graders across the playground. She wore her hair up now, not in the tight bun Dorian had always said looked neater, but loose, tucked behind one ear. She didn't wear makeup anymore either, not because she'd given up, but because she didn't need to be presentable for anyone except herself. Leora spotted me first. She broke into a run with her arms flailing, her little boots slapping the sidewalk. Aunt Faith! I crouched down just in time to catch her mid-leap. Her arms clung around my neck like ivy, her laughter rising with the breeze. I drew you a dog, she said between gasps. A big one, with a hat. Of course you did, I laughed. That dog's going straight on the fridge. Malis looked up then, meeting my eyes across the field. Her smile was soft, still tired, but real. The kind of smile people have when they've fought for it. Later that afternoon, we sat on the porch of my little cottage, just next door to hers. Elric handed me a drawing he'd made during free period. In crayon, bold red letters read, "My hero." Above it, a picture of me with a cape and coffee mug. You gave me muscles, I said. You deserve them, he shrugged. We hung it beside the others on the hallway wall. He never mentioned Dorian anymore, not even in passing. Malis had taken over teaching art part-time at the school. The same woman who once thought she couldn't leave the house without checking in with someone now handed out watercolor brushes and taught kids how to draw safe places. As for me, I'd gone back to work at the MRI clinic. The days were quiet, predictable. I volunteered on Saturdays at a women's shelter just outside of town. I didn't speak much during group sessions, unless someone needed help navigating paperwork or just a silent nod. That I could do, because some families are born, some are chosen, and others, you build with your bare hands, stitch by stitch. A week later, the official court notice came in the mail. Dorian had accepted a plea deal, guilty to financial fraud and obstruction. Attempted murder had been reduced to reckless endangerment due to insufficient physical evidence, which wasn't a surprise, just another quiet punch to the gut. He lost his job, his license, his parental rights. He didn't send a letter, not to Malus, not to the kids, not even to Seraphine, who had stopped calling weeks ago after needing time to process. Fine. The night the ruling came through, Malus sat at the kitchen table with the letter in her hands. She didn't cry, she just read it once, folded it in half, and exhaled long and low. I kept thinking there'd be relief, she said. Instead, I asked. It's just stillness, but not empty, just quiet. I understood. Exactly. 3 days after that, I got an email from Dad. It was brief, just a few lines. You were right. I'm sorry I didn't say it then. I see it now. I didn't reply. Not right away. I didn't delete it either. I highlighted it, not to forget it, but to remember that some acknowledgments, even late, matter more than the noise that came before them. Malus still jumped sometimes when the wind rattled the windows. Leora refused to sleep unless the hallway light was on, and she knew I was in the house. I still found myself startled by cold, reaching for a scarf or checking the locks twice on stormy nights. But we were safe. We were warm. We were rebuilding. That evening, after dinner, we sat on the porch again, Malus, the kids, and me. The sun was sinking behind the ridge, casting the whole yard in gold. There wasn't any music, just the hum of insects, the creak of old wood, and Leora's giggles as a neighbor's dog darted across the lawn with a tennis ball. Elric sat beside me, quiet as usual, then slowly reached for my hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I looked over at Malus, and for the first time, she didn't flinch when I met her gaze. She nodded slightly, not in approval, not in gratitude, but in understanding. Because she knew what I'd known since the night I found her in that cave. He said no one would come for her. But I did. And I always will. Sometimes, the people who are dismissed, ignored, or labeled as too much are the very ones who show up when it matters most. This story isn't just about justice, it's about loyalty, courage, and choosing to stand in the storm when everyone else turns away. What would you do if someone you loved was silently being erased? Let me know in the comments, and if you found something real in this story, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories like this waiting to be told.